Back in 2015, Logitech released the G920 steering wheel at a price point of $400. And for the past couple of years, it's been a really great mid-range wheel for people that are just getting into sim racing for the first time. But over time, a lot of wheels nowadays have either gotten up or surpassed the G920, including Logitech's very own G923, which came out about 2 years ago. So my name is Asari TC, and welcome to my G920 steering wheel review. So the first thing we're going to be looking at today is the wheel hardware, and looking all around the wheelbase is made out of leather with a stainless steel piece on top to signify when it's centered. Then moving on to the center of the wheel, we have the Logitech G logo in a shiny reflective plastic material. And this logo is not an actual button, but it's just there to show that it's a Logitech product. However, everything else on the front of the controller is actual buttons you can bind to things in games, just like an Xbox controller. And it even includes the home button at the bottom of the wheel under the center logo. And here it's pretty identical to this Xbox controller I have, but the only things that are missing are the back bumpers, as the gas and brake pedals cover that, and the left joystick is covered by steering. And there's not really much that covers the right joystick, which is typically used as a field of view joystick depending on what type of game you're playing. And another thing to note here is that the steering radius of this wheel is 900 degrees. And to showcase that, I'm going to spin the wheel to the right here, and it's going to do a full 360 and then another 90 degrees before it fully stops turning. And the same thing for the steering radius goes for the left side, but in general, this wheel is almost completely accurate to most consumer vehicles, as consumer vehicles range from 972 to 1152, so this wheel is just quite short of that. And with the steering radius being maxed out at 900, you can also make it smaller to play other games, so that if they are not good for 900 degrees, but if they're good for something shorter, you can always change it in the software settings. Now, if we turn the wheel here, you can see that there's two paddle shifters, one to shift up, which is on the right, and one to shift down, which is on the left, and they're pretty clicky in my opinion. And just like the center ring on top of the wheel, these paddle shifters are also made out of stainless steel. After the paddle shifters here, we have both the clamps on the left and the right side, and you can twist them out and pop them to adjust the clamps at the bottom, and the material for them is plastic. And you can use the two things on either side to tighten the clamps to fit on your desk and wheel stand so they won't fall off when you're driving. So now when I turn over this wheel, you can see all the outlets where the wheel accessories and your power sources go into. The first outlet on the far left is to plug in the main power source to the wheel. It's not the USB that's connected to the wheel that's plugged into the computer for the controls, but it's the outlet that powers up all the force feedback mechanisms and the mechanics for the wheel interior. And next to the power plug is the pedals plug, which is pretty self-explanatory. You plug it in and then the pedals start working. Now moving on to the right here, we have the cable that can either be plugged into your PC or your Xbox. The cable is already connected to the wheel to allow the user to have an easier plug-and-play experience upon unboxing. Now for the last outlet on the far right, that's where the Logitech G shifter plugs in. It's just like the pedals where you plug it in and you can use it, but the G shifter doesn't come with the wheel unlike the pedals, so I'll link that separately in the description. And looking in the middle here, there are 4 slots to fit the 4 cables, so when you're mounting the wheel, they don't crush the cables. So for example, here I'm going to take this USB cable and fit it on the right side. The cable slots are also built to support the cable so they won't get loose when mounting. Beforehand, I never did this, which resulted in some of my cables getting crushed every time I mounted the wheel to the desk. But fortunately, the cable damage wasn't too crazy in which any of the functionality was compromised. So next up, we're going to be taking a look at the pedals, and starting off with the pedal on the far right is of course the gas pedal. In my opinion, the G920's gas pedal is perfect in terms of how it feels to push on it. And just like most vehicles, the gap between the gas and the brake is further than that of the brake and the clutch. Now moving on to the brake pedal also feels very good, but sometimes in my scenario it feels very hard to push on, especially since I have a rolling chair. Now granted, I assume the brakes are like this because it's not ideal to jam on the brakes in game, just like it's not ideal to do it in a real car. But if you're someone like me who has a rolling chair, be prepared to get pushed back a few times by it. Now the last pedal we're going to be looking at is the one on the far left, which is the clutch pedal, and it looks pretty much identical to the brake. For my use with the clutch pedal is also another pedal that's really responsive, and I have enjoyed using it for the time I had it so far. Just like the paddle shifters, the shiny parts of the pedals are made out of stainless steel, and the rest of the pedal base is made out of plastic. Now seeing as we're about to head into the software, I thought I'd show you guys this quick clip of the wheel calibration once you plug it into your computer. Essentially the wheel just starts spinning all the way to the left and then all the way to the right, and then it will fully center itself. And this happens for every time you're booting up your computer or your console, or for when you're just plugging it in. And with that being said, I'm going to show off all the wheel settings and how to operate them in the Logitech software. So now that we're here at the Logitech software, this is what the main interface of the wheel looks like, but if I back out real quick, it shows both the G305 and the G920, which is both the mouse and the current wheel I have. And you can click on any of them to change the settings, but here we're going to click on the wheel and show it off a bit. So now here on the first page, we can change just a few things such as the operating range, the sensitivity, and the strength of the center spring. And on the second page here, we can also test the pedal sensitivities and whatnot. In both pages, take your input so you can test to see what's working and what's not working essentially, and to test your sensitivities for everything. And besides messing with base wheel settings, you can also do it for each game or each app on your desktop. So for example here, I'm going to hold the drop down and go to F1 2021. And this comes in pretty handy for when you want to change your settings for a certain game but not for all your games. So all you would have to do is adjust that bar until it reaches 360, which is essentially turning your wheel 180 to either left and the right from the center. And generally, the setting goes for every racing game you play. If you don't like the 900 degrees base rotation, you can always change it to 360, 540 depending on what game you play. But for me personally, I run 900 degrees on most of my games and I haven't really needed to change it to 540 or 360 that much. Overall though, G-Hub is just a generally great software for customizing certain things about your products, and in case here I can just customize certain settings for certain games with my wheel. And with that being said, it's time to move on to some games. And we're back, guys, and today I'll be playing F1 2021 as our first game. And as for my experience on this game, I've played it quite a bit in the past, but not as much compared to the last 2 weeks, as I've gotten back into it through some friends and I've been playing this game quite a bit. So I'm going to show you guys how I'm feeling about the wheel in this game and how I'm enjoying it so far. So I figured I'd take the time right now to tell you guys how I'm feeling about the force feedback. So far, the force feedback feels pretty good. I got a quarter cut? That's weird. So far, the force feedback feels pretty good in this game, and I haven't really had much issues with it. So I'm currently on a new track I haven't ran before on F1, which is Monaco, which is why I'm taking this pretty slow. As I was saying with the force feedback though, it feels pretty solid in this game. I can feel a lot of the things, such as when I'm like going over bumps or going at fast speeds. As for my settings though, I haven't really changed anything at all besides like changing my gearing to manual and just turning off some assists. And besides those minor changes, I'm still using the default wheel settings for the G920, which is also a plus in my opinion for this game and a lot of other games where they have like basic default settings that are already pre-made for like certain wheels such as this one. And of course, seeing that I'm playing F1, the wheel degree of rotation is 360 degrees, so it is 180 both left and right to mimic an actual F1 car. But generally speaking though, I do recommend this wheel as a starting wheel, especially for games like F1, as the wheel support is very good and you can always change a lot of the settings. Such as force feedback, you can always make it stronger or weaker according to your needs too, and some other settings you can change. But anyways, I'm gonna keep learning this track and keep running this practice, and I'll see you guys on Assetto Corsa in a bit. Well, welcome back guys. Now we're playing Assetto Corsa, and here I'm in an S14 and I'm on a custom track. And I still have the wheel here, just added an e-brake and a shifter. I'm not going to really go in depth with the e-brake and shifter, seeing as there's not much really to talk about them. I can answer your questions in the comments below about them. This is mostly going to be a drifting review, seeing as if I were to just race in a Assetto, it wouldn't be that much different from F1. But I've been drifting with this for a little while, for a couple months, and I've been enjoying it so far. For my degrees of rotation for the wheel, it's 900 degrees, and that's the default for the wheel and Assetto, so I didn't change anything else. That regard, I messed up the drifter. For every time you drift or lose traction, the wheel loosens up to simulate what it would be like in real life to lose control of the wheel. So there's like a bit of lockup right here when I'm going, but when I hit this corner right here, I can freely spin the wheel and like point it wherever I want. So it's just like that. The wheel does a pretty good job in simulating what it feels like to lose traction or just drifting, which is a plus in my opinion. So overall, the wheel is pretty good at drifting. It's not the best compared to other wheels, as you would feel it a lot more accurately, but once you get the hang of it, you can hit some really nice clips with it. As for the pedals, I didn't mention this much in F1, but the pedals in general, they do what they need to do. The gas pedal is like not much extra push on it, but the brake, you would have to use a lot of force to push on it. And for my case here, the clutch is very responsive in terms of launching the car and keeping the power going for when I'm going sideways. All in all, if you're someone who's getting into sim racing or looking for a wheel in the low end price range, then I totally recommend the G920. The wheel itself is sitting at around $250 right now, or $300 depending where you get it from, and it's not that much different from the $400 G923. All the basic features are pretty solid here, such as the force feedback and the way the wheel spins, but they're not the craziest compared to like more expensive wheels. So with that being said, I'm going to tell you guys about my final thoughts and conclusions about using this wheel for around 7 months. So after using this wheel for about 7 months, I can confidently say that this wheel is great for those who want to get into sim racing for the first time. The features that this wheel have are pretty easy to understand, and for the price range it's currently at, the value is pretty high in my opinion. For me though, I'm someone who's gotten more serious about sim racing over the past several months, so hopefully in the future I'll be able to invest in the higher end wheel and compare it to the G920. With that being said, my name is AsariTC and I'll see you all in the next one. Later.